All right, we are live and back. We are live inside the lab another Saturday for our routine weekly live stream. I believe this is live stream number 8 of our 10 live stream experiment. Uh, I just started live streaming a few months ago, and I wanted to try to structure a show format that can be both entertaining and educational and just informative, and that way it can empower you as a PC gamer or a PC enthusiast or just an all around all in type user PC enthusiast, right? Let me jump over to the chat. I see Chris is here as always. How you doing, fam? It's good to see you here on this Saturday. Tell me how your week in a short form or as quick as you can. Tell me how your week was, and anybody else that's just joined in on the chat. I know I shared it out across a few of my socials. If this is your first time here during one of my live streams, let me know in the chat. We normally have a pretty good outing. So I also want to mention real quick, last week's live stream, I didn't notice until after the show ended that we it was about a 4 hour live stream. And I never intended it to be that long, but we were just having a good time, answering questions and just sharing helpful information in the chat amongst other people in the community, and it was just a great time. So I don't anticipate this live stream to be anywhere near as long, but we are going to go over a few things you want to look for in a gaming monitor, either if you haven't quite yet bought it yet or you're currently shopping for a new gaming monitor. But I want to jump over to the chat and say hello to Drinky Crow. That's right, Drinky Crow. Good to see you again. I know you were with us on last week's live stream. Thanks for joining in. Again, tell me how your week was, or anything good or bad happened. I had quite a series of unfortunate events, but I'm here. That's not going to stop the hustle. All right. Just want to give a few time to let a few more people come in and join us, but I want to do a little bit of house cleaning while we wait, just to remind you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, that we do have a few helpful links in the pinned comment or in the description box, starting with our newsletter, which is free to sign up for and join. Sometimes YouTube's notifications aren't all that great. We had a member here in the community share that in the chat where he told me that he's not receiving all of the notifications or he only gets live stream notifications, which my understanding is YouTube pushes live stream notifications more than video on demand videos or VODs. So joining our newsletter helps me stay communicated with you in the best possible way, just in case YouTube notifications, don't send out the notifications and you're not getting the videos when they're released. This really helps, you know, watching the videos in their first 24 to 48 hours is really crucial. So, being able to network and just communicate with the audience through the mailing list is quite effective to the growth here on the channel. I promise to never spam your inbox, and you're always more than welcome to unsubscribe from the newsletter should you see fit. But I'm looking at no more than 2 emails a month. One's just like a 1 month, like to say 1 month ahead of the content to let you know what's going on in the channel, what you can anticipate in terms of content or for the next month or so. And the other is just maybe an upcoming video series that we're planning to do here monthly on the channel. So you can find the sign up link down in the description box for that. On top of that, we also have a merch shop. We use Teespring. It is currently in beta, what I like to call. I am wearing the one of the signature brands now, and super comfortable, and the fabric feels super premium. I love it. Wide range of different t-shirts and hoodies and other other hardline items to choose from. Purchasing merch really helps support the channel in a great way, and I understand we have some friends and fam that are across the globe, and shipping can be expensive, and I no way want you to feel obligated to support the channel in this way. You're already a subscriber here, and that's supporting me, just both terms of just inspiring me to create content and just keeping up with the hustle. Chris says all good, nothing special. All right. Sometimes Sometimes that's a good thing, especially especially when our weeks just kind of unfold the way we expect them to. Just helps that way. Oh, I see Just Sampson just joined into the chat. It's good to see you, a fellow member in Andrew's community. Good to see you, and just across the board. I know just a couple of us. It's really interesting when I join in other live streams and I see some of the familiar faces and some of the familiar names. It's really amazing because YouTube is just a really big place. So, when I see Just Samson and some of the other people live streams and some of the other creators live streams, I watch. It's just really interesting. But it's good to see you, Just Samson. In this live stream, we were just excuse me, we were just wrapping up with some of the house cleaning. We was talking about the mailing list you can join. That's down in the description box. We have merch. You can also visit the InsideTheLab.net website for like an expanded, I would like to call maybe even expanded universe behind the content. So behind the scenes, you get to know me a little bit more personally, and you can also contact me should you have like a long-winded question or you want to ask me something in private, or if you want to possibly collab. I know I'm in talks and in discussion now with a few other creators to do some interview form content with them. So be on the lookout for that, both here on my channel, and if you follow some of those creators, Dr. Elo and Andrew from Consult a Blind Guy, be on the lookout for some of those videos. So yeah, Justin says, "Hey, yeah, what's up? What's up? Yeah, so let me wrap up with the housekeeping. Say hello to everybody once again in the chat, and thanks for joining in. But we are talking about monitors, more specifically, PC gaming monitors, because most console players they game on TVs. Right? That's just a hardcore fact, especially here in these past couple generations that have really taken off and has done great, has had great improvements in the console segment. So if you look at what the Series X and the upcoming PS5 is going to do for consoles, some PC gamers might even start, looking at gaming monitors to complement the upcoming hardware in those consoles, which has improved. I and no, I've never really like bash consoles in any way. I've always believed consoles have a place, they have a purpose, but gaming PCs they have character, so you get a little bit of best of both worlds. But just looking at the technology and how we're getting new graphics cards and new architectures and say like the upcoming Navi series, which I will be talking about in this Monday's vlog because a lot of interesting details have surfaced online about a few upcoming leaks, and I would love to go into a little bit more depth. And the upcoming Rising keynote is the 28th. So it's right around the corner. It's this week. So Navi is going to be here, and it's also the same hardware that's used in the consoles. It's a custom variant to compensate for the lack of cooling, in consoles, which is interesting because a few weeks back there was a few, leaks and rumors from early reviewers, from early large tech reviewers that the Series X, like it's hot, like it ran hot. And consoles always to me, like my PS4, when I had a PS4, just always ran hot. Like it was just always hot, and I just came to accept it. I tried to accommodate the space that it was in to compensate for the lack of passive cooling. So these parts they're cut down versions. So although they're similar, this is why a console can never really perform like a PC can, especially that the power supplies on consoles aren't that great. I see we have a few friends that joined us over in the chat. I want to say hello to J Rod. That's a friend of mine. It's Jeremy. What's up, Jeremy? I believe that's Jeremy. He said, "What's good, my guy? What's happening, Jeremy?" Drinky Cow says they clone their first 120 gig HDD to a 250 gig SSD, old desktop backup computer, run faster, like 45 minutes transfer. Yeah, that's a great upgrade, Drinky Crow, and it's an upgrade that I highly recommend if someone's on an older platform like you just mentioned, like an older desktop that one of the single most effective upgrades you can make in a budget conscious way is upgrading from a mechanical drive, a standard hard drive, to a solid slate drive. Oh, if your motherboard supports it, even an NVMe M.2 SSD, even if your motherboard don't, you can buy a PCIe adapter, so long as the motherboard is PCIe 3.0 compliant, I believe. But it's a significant difference between running your OS on a SSD as opposed to running your OS on a mechanical drive. It's just faster responsiveness, and in terms of gaming, you get like the games just load so much faster. It's amazing. J. Rod says, as a console and PC gamer, I've never played on a normal TV due to low refresh rate. Yeah, absolutely, and that's something we're going to talk about in this live stream a little bit further. Is refresh rate and response time on on monitors and their different panel types. Tiger Nation says good morning, well afternoon if you will. That's interesting, Tiger Nation, because I meant to let everybody know I am located. I'm here in the United States of America, East Coast, Maryland, and it is daytime. It is daytime here. It's 12, about a little close to 1 p.m. It's nice cloudy day. Not a lot of sun, but that's okay because that's kind of what I like. But yeah, if it's nighttime where you are, it's interesting. And also anybody else that's watching, let me know if you're in a different time zone. I love talking to just different people over across the globe and all over the world, because we share this hobby. Although we're separated by continents and oceans and rivers and what have you, we all share this hobby, and so we all can still commune and talk about it. And the live streams here, especially recently, since I've tried to expand the show, it's been one of my favorite highlights of the week is coming in on Saturday and just fellowshipping with you guys about this hobby, and also trying to share as much helpful information that I can. And even if I don't have all the answers, I will try, because I don't. I will try to point you in the right direction, but I do try my best to help you make an informed decision on your on your PC purchases, on your PC upgrades. Around here, we consider ourselves used PC enthusiasts, but we welcome the new stuff too, because Ryzen 5000 series. If you didn't know, Ryzen 5000 series is coming up on November 5th, and there's also been early leaks that's showing that the 5700X is providing like the best single core performance for gaming. So, excuse me, that's a CPU that I am slightly starting to lean forward to, especially since I'm likely going to just upgrade my editing rig to a 9900K until Zen 400, I'm not Zen 400, until Intel's Rocket Lake comes out. And that's something we talked about in last week's live stream and one of the vlogs we did last week. So you can check those out in the recent playlist. And if you're not a subscriber, I welcome you to join our community here by tapping around subscribe icon down below. It's somewhere. I imagine well, it gets confusing, but it's down there. Tap the round subscribe icon. Hopefully, this live stream, if you're not subscribed yet, will be the one that I earn your subscription. J. Ross says, "Oh yeah, agreed, definitely." And Just Sampson says 9:50 here in California. So yeah, got a little Cali love. Gotta love that 3 hour time difference. So yeah, one. Let's get started. Let's talk about gaming monitors, right? So the first step you should consider, and I'm going to this is for users that either have a gaming monitor now, or you're looking to build your system, and of course you're going to need a monitor to complement your gaming system. I i say that, or in my opinion, I highly suggest that you you build a system, you start building a system by already deciding your monitor. That's even if you haven't already bought it yet. It's very important you get parts to your system that's going to be able to drive the monitor's refresh rate and just push all those pixels, whatever the resolution you choose. And just to simplify resolutions, right? You can imagine, the more the more numbers, more pixels. Put it in paint perspective. I personally game at 3440 by 1440p. It's somewhere in between, 4K and 1440p. It's like 2K. But just know that 1920 by 1080p is one of the most common monitors used for gaming and just basic office use or studies and things, what have you, like that. J Rod, let me jump over to the chat because J Rod says I'm definitely building a Ryzen build next. Yeah, and let me know if that's, you're going with an X570 Zen 3 chip, and if so, which one? And J-Rod says I have 4K all the way. 4K, I love 4K for single player games, and we're going to talk about that here in this live stream. But I love 4K for single player games, and even when I was testing a 2080 Ti out here recently, I noticed that Fortnite, even Fortnite, just kind of looked good and just felt good to where it not doesn't really help competitively, but I did still run the game at competitive settings and still got really good frame rates. So yeah, 4K is great. I mean, it's still not a common resolution, but with AMD really starting to market a true 4K gaming card, I think we're going to see 4K monitors kind of low drop in price so that even console gamers can maybe start looking at switching to 4K monitors. And now we have graphics cards that's going to be able to push this resolution on the lower end because AMD is looking to releasing graphics card all up and down the stack. So we're going to see, the 6800 and 6700 series Navi cards, and I'm going to save some of that. We're not going to go too deep into detail into Navi because, or Big Navi, because I'm going to talk about it in Monday's vlog. So be on the lookout for that video. We skipped this Monday's vlog. I just didn't feel like we had enough newsworthy content to to produce a video. So, but there's many factors that goes into deciding your monitor. The type of games you play, and if you create content, or if you do schoolwork and things like that, or you pay your bill, even if you pay your bills, you want a good monitor. J. Ross says, yeah, especially with 8K monitors coming. Um, yeah, I hope to see them lower in price and they become more mainstream. I've I've seen a couple videos that have shown the RTX 3090 running in 8K and getting decent frame rates. So, um, but we all are well aware of the RTX 3090 and 3080 supply demand issue, or demand supply. The CEO Jensen, he put it in a very interesting way. If you haven't seen it, look it up. Not gonna comment on it too much, but it rather you believe there's a supply issue or a demand issue, there's just simply not enough graphics cards to go around to people who are ready to buy them, but scalpers, and they're jacking the prices up, but people are still buying and enjoying these graphics cards, so that's okay too. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see 8K maybe within the next year or two. um, just keep in mind, Nvidia just switched their they just switched to TSMC, so we believe that they're going to shrink that processor node, and we are going to see refresh 30 series cards in 2021, I believe. But again, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in Monday's block. So the most common resolution is 1920 by 1080p. I was going to pull up the Steam stats, but because Steam is some people don't always agree with Steam's findings because not everybody has their systems connected to Steam, and even if you have downloaded Steam, you have to opt in to let them scan your system to register your specs. But 1080p is still one of the most common resolutions. I believe that 2560 by 1440p is a a really good resolution for both gaming and for both content creation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more because I use a 1440p monitor, but it's a 21 by 9 aspect ratio, so it's a little wider on the horizontal axis. So it is an MSI optics brand. Let me bring it up here. Let me Not there. All right. And so it is an MSI optics brand, and I I love this monitor. It's great for, I mean, it has a 100 hertz refresh rate. It's great for gaming. I use it for content creation because I didn't want to go with like two monitors at the time. So I can just use two windows because it's the equivalent of two 24-inch monitors, I believe, or two 17-inch monitors. Drinky Pro. I keep wanting to say Drinky Cow. Drinky Crow says AK be crazy. AK is almost near hyper realistic, and when you think of once you factor in ray tracing, I mean, wow. Once the GPUs do come around that can run 8K, even at high settings, you imagine games like how games like Cyberpunk 2077 will look, just the detail, and you factor in ray tracing, so you have now hyper realistic graphics and also hyper realistic real time ray tracings in the running in the background. But for sakes of both budget and simplicity, I personally went with a ultra wide quad HD 3440 by 1440p MSI monitor. I actually paid lower than this when I got it brand new, and I bought it from eBay. But it has 100 hertz refresh rate, and I play a lot of single player games. I don't play a lot of competitive games, and when I do, 100 hertz is almost more than enough for myself. But the response time is one of its biggest downside. But again, since a lot of um, I don't play a lot of competitive games, so response time is just how fast the pixels change from black to white, so how fast the colors change. And I I really don't see that big of a difference, me personally, when I'm playing single player games. Like I really don't notice it as much, and I don't jack up the settings as much as I want to. So I try to stay close to my monitor's refresh rate if I can't be above it in most of the games I play. I don't enable FreeSync, which or G-Sync, because this my monitor was on the one of the list of monitors to have to support G-Sync after Nvidia decided to to uh, open it up to FreeSync monitors, but I don't enable it. So I just let it go and just try to be somewhere between there. But I do like playing games in their highest graphic fidelity. FPS games also, I mean, FPS games can benefit from the extra real estate, which you would see here and here. Like I've just noticed when I'm playing Fortnite, I can look straight and still notice a player running like on my right side, on my right peripheral, on my left peripheral, even though I'm just looking straight. I can detect the movement on that right side and just quickly move my mouse in that direction while still keeping an open view. So I mean, it does help in my opinion. And I'm noticing even hardware, when I'm testing hardware, I'm not as good when I'm playing on, say, the 28-inch 28-inch 4K Asus monitor I have currently on a test bed in the lower portion of the lab. It's not, it, it has a standard 16 by 9 aspect ratio, but I'm so used to having that extra space when I'm playing that it just feels different. But still, I mean, it really boils down to you, the user, and professional competitive gamers in esports. They typically just use 24-inch standard 16 by 9 1080p monitors. So, yeah. And if you just joined in on the chat, tell us where you're watching. Um, tell us how your week is going. We're talking about gaming monitors, and we're going to segue into the different types of monitors, right? Because you have, let me switch back here. Because you have TN, VA, and IPS monitors. And before I jump into it, JRod TV says, well, some people have the misconception about having the 4K monitors that when they stream, others will be able to see the 4K quality when that's not the case. And you're absolutely right, especially if you look at Facebook streaming. I believe if you're not in their version of their partner program, you can only stream. Your output is only 720p, which you would want if you don't have good internet in your area for starters. And I mean, you're absolutely right, J Rod. You can't the other end user just will not see the true 4K resolution that you're seeing. Um, and even most streamers still, I mean, I output when I was streaming on Twitch, my output was 1080p. Even on this monitor, I still went with a lower output, and I still could have dropped it down to 720p and just say like up the graphics and just ran it at like 720p ultra. But I don't have a bandwidth issue here, and I stream directly off the router on my setup. I mean, I was streaming to Twitch, and I should get back to streaming to Twitch. Like I've been wanting to stream some Fallout 76, especially with their new Brotherhood of Steel DLC that either just came out or is just getting ready to come out. I was reading. So it's been wanting me to jump back in and take a look at Appalachia and also take anybody along the way, excuse me, who would want to join. But yeah, most streamers should have a firm understanding that if you don't stream out to 4K, I mean the other person would need a 4K monitor and the bandwidth is just not there. So many variables. You would also still, and it also depends on what are you streaming on too. Like, are you streaming on your graphics card? Are you streaming on your CPU? J Rod, what do you stream on? Do you stream on your CPU? Or you stream on your GPU? Anybody in the chat, tell me, do you stream on your GPU? On your CPU? Depending on the game, I stream on my CPU, which is an 8700K thick core. And yes, I am due for an upgrade, I will honestly admit. Not because I necessarily need more IPC, but more so because I need more cores and more RAM. I definitely need more RAM. But yeah, so you have 10 IPS VA panels. TN stands for Twisted Pneumatic. It's one of the oldest panel types. It replaced CRT monitors, the old CRT, the Cathoroid 2 monitors. It replaced those. They were easy to produce. They could produce so many of them, and they were just less bulky. But they do have their downsides. Um, and they also have their pros. They also have their pros. They have their cons and they have their pros. One of their pros is they almost always have the lowest input lag. And they, well, I'll tell you what, let's jump over here. Let's let's jump over here. And here in a second, I want you to tell me, J Ross says it's stream on a GPU. Okay. And now also tell me what kind of monitor you're using in the chat. If you know. If you know, tell me what type of monitor you're using in the chat because I'm gonna switch our filter to oh, see if I can find it. TN because we're talking about TN. Again, TN or twist it means twist hit pneumatic. But as you can see here, they have some of the lowest response times across the board. And they're budgeted quite affordably. For example, the 75 hertz, which 75 hertz isn't necessarily a competitive refresh rate. But even if you don't play competitive games, but you still enjoy high refresh rates, that's kind of like my style. Like when I'm playing The Witcher 3, it feels incredibly smooth, past 100 frames. But I have to like play with the settings to get there. I need to stop messing around and just go ahead and start gaming on my 2080 Ti. But I like the 2080s, this MSI's Shroud, and I am due for an upgrade in the GPU department as well. But TN panels, uh, one of the biggest downsides to TN panels, right? If you look here, is their color contrast isn't that great, and they they fall flat on the color spectrum as far as displaying the wide range of colors available on the sRGB spectrum, and that's one of the biggest downsides to them. It's one of the reasons why they're often priced as low as they are, but they do support high refresh rates. For example, this Asus VG, and I love Asus monitors, by the way. They're no way informed sponsors of this channel, but they do make like aesthetically pleasing products, right? But TN panels, TN panels don't have good contrast ratio. They just don't. Compared to say a VA panel of similar pricing and even an IPS panel, which we're going to get here in a second. But TN panels, while priced relatively low, are also going to have not that great viewing angles. That's like comparison to a VA panel. Now VA stands for vertical alignment. And I'm going to foreshadow a little bit here because VA panels VA panels are essentially the jack of all trades when it comes in terms of a balance of pure color contrast and response time. And also, let me factor in the most important variable, and that's the price. Because you know, last week we talked about our budget where we put together a system that factored in the cost of a monitor and the total system budget. I'm trying to find TN. Why can't I find it now? Ah, here we go. And we factored in, the total cost of the system along with the monitor, and altogether it was about $1,400. And I believe that system had a 1660 Ti, which is a 6 gigabyte NVIDIA Turing GPU, which I can't remember off the top of my head how much it's priced, but I imagine the prices are set to drop here coming soon after the release of Navi, and if Nvidia does decide to steal AMD's thunder with the 3070 and maybe possibly a 3070 Ti. I'm not going to talk about that too much again in this live stream. We are going to cover it in Monday's vlog. But VA panels have a blend of both response time, and that's the time, again, response time is the is important. Response time is important if you're especially a competitive gamer, okay? Especially if you're a competitive gamer. Your refresh rate is also important because you you want to make sure you are at a competitive refresh rate, which is typically anything above 144 hertz. But you do have like 360 options coming out, or 360 options already out now, but those are extreme, and those are for people who are really serious and who really want to invest in their esports career. And I commend, those people who want to pursue that career. It is super competitive, but a lot of those players really grind and really make it happen. And it's interesting to see what the competitive landscape looks after, hopefully all of this is said and done. But, VA panels, VA panels stand for it's vertical alignment, and you can get a decent, even like a larger size VA panel if you're somewhere in a ballpark of 220 to 249. And in that way, last week our budget was about $1,400, and even if we stuck to that budget of $1,400, we could put more money into the GPU to say drive this refresh rate of 144 hertz. So if you're playing games like CS:GO, right? If you're playing games like CS:GO, CS:GO, Apex Legends. I know Apex Legends is kind of resurging. I've also just read that I believe it's coming to Steam. But if you play games like Apex, PUBG, even Fortnite, especially CS:GO, especially, um, you're going to want a competitive refresh rate of at least 144 hertz. My understanding, that's just like the entry point. You can do 120, absolutely, but eventually you might want to consider investing in your monitor first and foremost before getting your system. And again, we talked about this in last week's live stream. Consider your needs or your needs in the next 6 months. Do you plan on streaming competitively? Like you just know, like if this was, you know, in halfway in the year, or you just know towards the end of the year, you know what, I want to get serious about streaming. I want to level up my game. I want to level up, my competitiveness in this select game. If you know that's the direction you want to take, then invest in your monitor now. Or invest in your monitor now. I'm sorry. Invest in a competitive refresh rate. You can do it with a VA, excuse me, a VA panel like this MSI Optics G24 C4. And I just want to remind everybody that you can find these monitors, or I'm sorry, you can find the links to these monitors down in the chat below if you are so interested in getting if you're interested in making a purchase either now or down the road. They are affiliate links, so just full disclosure, but you can find them down in the description box for all these different types of panels that we are talking about today. So far, we discussed Twisted Pneumatic, which are TN panels, some of the most common panels because they were easy to manufacture. We also talked about VA panels, which is essentially the jack of all trade type panels. And they offer a best of both worlds in terms of color contrast and refresh rates and response time. And they're also priced really well, some of the ones we were looking at here, and even some of the ones that I've kind of pre-selected on Amazon. Again, you can find this monitor down in the description box, but it's $200. So, and it's 165 hertz. and it's G-Sync compatible. G-Sync, I mean, before you would need a NVIDIA GPU that supports G-Sync to enable it, but they've recently opened it up on some FreeSync monitors. But I highly recommend if you're going to go with a G-Sync compatible motherboard or not motherboard monitor. Jeez, I can't use my words today. If you're going with a G-Sync compatible monitor, consider a NVIDIA GPU, hands down. But this monitor is priced really well. It has an extremely low response time, half a millisecond, and it's only $200. That's a really good, monitor to step into the competitive scene and even just, level up if you're trying to, um, if you're trying to just get better and you're ready to get serious about competitive gaming, consider a VA panel, okay? Or if you're if you're a single player gamer, right? Like like myself, like if you're a single player gamer, consider 2K resolution. That's 2560 by 1440. Some of those monitors typically come in uh, the IPS variety. I can never say that word. But if you're uninterested in a higher resolution for single player games and you still want to game at a competitive level, you're not interested in TN, you're not interested in VA, right? You can go with an IPS monitor. Now, IPS stands for in-plane switching, and it's each manufacturer has their own name for it, but all the technologies essentially work the same way. It just depends on, um, it just depends on it just depends on how the manufacturer uses the technology. Uh, Samsung calls it something else, but Damon Warren, oh, it's good to see you. It's good to see you, Damien. Damien says 1440 is 2K. Yeah, it's weird. It's like 2K and then like 2.5K, but yeah, 1440 is 2K. It gets really confusing because you have 3440 by 1440, and then you have 2560 by 1440, which we have. Let me bring up our scene here. In between, in between 4K, you have 3440 by 1440p, which just gives you a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more pixels, and I just sorry, almost lost my train of thought. I wanted to say hello to the Mr. Zombified. It's good to see you again. Mr. Zombified is a regular here on our live streams. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. Tell me how your week is. We're talking about monitors and some of the things to look for. So far, we've explained some TN panels, assisted pneumatic panels. We talked about VA panels, vertically aligned panels, some of the different resolutions you see here on the screen. 1280 by 720. If you're still on a 1280 by 720p monitor, then don't feel no shame to you because I tell you what, you're probably enjoying some really smooth frame rates depending on the kind of hardware you're using. And sometimes it's not always about the graphics, as most competitive players try to run their games in the lowest possible graphics setting. Tricion is good to see you. Tricion says, "What are you guys talking about?" We're talking about monitors and some of the things you should look for in the different monitor types. So we've talked about Tricion. Actually, it's funny because I just seen your comment when I was filling Damien and Mr. Zombified who just joined us. I was explaining to those gentlemen that we are talking about gaming monitors and what to look for and what to expect before you either make a purchase or when you make your purchase, the different panel types to choose from and their pros and cons. So we talked about TN panels, which are some of the most common 1080p panels, and that's he says, yeah, you just answered my question. Um, yeah, we were talking about twisted pneumatic panels and we had started at vertically aligned panels, and then we were switching to in-plane switching, which is IPS panels, and we were just getting ready to get into the pros and cons of IPS panels. As Damian Warren says, how about refresh rate? Because yeah, we're going to talk about refresh rate in a second because refresh rate is important, and Generally, the higher the refresh rate, the less input lag you're going to get. So your input lag is the delay between you click your mouse and then the action on the screen. And you would see why that is super important for competitive gamers to maximize their refresh rate. That way they can respond in their game quicker than their opponent. If they can reduce the input delay between their mouse and their monitor, which is why you want a higher refresh rate monitor for competitive gaming. Now, the different panel types, that that's different altogether. They all work the same in terms of how the monitor will rearrange the molecules on your screen, because that's how monitors work. As soon as monitors receive, voltage or powers, or as soon as you plug it in and you press on, power is sent to the monitors, and essentially they all rearrange the molecules in the same way. It just depends what starts to differentiate them is your viewing angles, which we're going to talk about here in a second. As I want to say hi to Lab Techs. They say hi, what's up? What's happening, Lab Techs? I can't remember if this is your first time on a live stream. I think I would have remembered. Our names are practically related almost. But it's good to see you, Lab Techs. Tell us where you're watching from, and it's good to have you here on our weekly Saturday live stream. But we were talking IPS panels, and let me jump over here to take a look at a few IPS panels. Since we looked at VA panels for a common refresh rate or a common resolution of 1920 by 1080p, right, with really low response time, 1 milliseconds. It's really good, and it's priced relatively well. So we did a you can do say like a Ryzen 2600X and maybe like a 2060 and get a and be able to maybe be around that refresh rate depending on the settings of the game. But you could compensate for that refresh rate by trying to put most of your budget in a beefy GPU. Also factoring in your CPU. I mean, you want to make sure I, bottlenecking bottlenecking is a really interesting topic. And if you're not familiar with bottlenecking in a nutshell, it's when I mean any component can essentially bottleneck a system. It's more commonly referenced to a CPU between feeding information to the GPU. And essentially, you want a fast enough CPU that can keep up with the GPU. So when I'm benchmarking, I try to keep my GPU utilization as close to like 90% as possible. It's close to like I mean, you want 99% GPU utilization. You want your GPU to bottleneck. You want that to be pegged at 100%. Your CPU, on the other hand, depending on if the game is CPU intensive, the CPU, on the other hand, you necessarily don't want like high CPU utilization. And my understanding is you definitely want to stay away from, say, 90% CPU utilization, 60% GPU utilization. If the game is in GPU, heavy, then something's wrong. You're likely not getting. I mean, it's not affecting your system in a major way. What it generally translates to is you're just not getting the most performance out of your system that you could possibly get because your CPU is not fast enough to keep up with the GPU. Your CPU needs to feed, it needs to feed the information to the GPU, and the GPU just renders the graphics. So it's standing by, ready and waiting to render the graphics. Is what the CUDA cores do inside of the GPU. They are solely responsible for rendering the pixels on your screen. Your CPU needs to work, especially at a resolution of 1080p. Not to confuse everybody, and if you have questions anytime during the live stream, let me know. But not to confuse anybody, but the higher your resolution, the more GPU bound you are, and that's one way to eliminate the a CPU bottleneck. Although I had a question on during last week's live stream that had me want to look into this a little bit more, so I did a little bit of off-camera testing. But I tested with the Ryzen 5 1600X and a RTX 2080 Ti at 4K, and I was messing around with the settings to try to see if I could still introduce a CPU bottleneck at that resolution. And I'll tell you what, it was really, really close. And I looked into the topic a little bit more, and so far, from what I can tell, is even though you're still very much GPU bound at a higher resolution, say like this monitor here, 20 like this MSI Optics, this 2560 by 1440p monitor, even at a resolution of this caliber, or even 4K like what I was testing at, so that's 3840 by 2160. But even at those higher resolutions, your CPU has to it still has to accommodate for those higher fidelity pixels, if that makes sense. And so I was still seeing high CPU utilizations, although I was running the game at 4K. That either tells me that you still want a CPU that is has fast, so it has good IPC, and at least 4 cores. At least 4 cores. So you can do it on an i5. Most people do game on an i5 or do use like an i5 and a higher end GPU. But as as lab tech, yeah, sure. See, as lab techs pointed out, the CPU has to work too. Like it still has functions. It still has to process data, and especially if it's a game like GTA 5 that has that has a lot of geometry and a lot of math to calculate. It still has to, it still has work to do. And as LabTech says, more other tasks. And if you're streaming as well, that's also going to take up CPU resources. If you have Discord running in the background, any other task going on in the background is going to take up CPU resources. So even at a higher resolution, that's just something to factor in. But with the system we built last week, that also accommodated for it was about a $400 monitor, ironically, could power this system. And your monitor, this is in my opinion, your monitor is one component you really want to stick with the longest. It's one thing to say, you want to upgrade your CPU every maybe 2 generations or so, or you know, your GPU every few generations, but your monitor, you should want that one variable to remain consistent and invest in a monitor that you know is going to suit your needs for the long run in terms of you're gaming competitively or you're a content creator, and so um, you want pure colors, you want as close to uh, you want good color contrast ratios. Those are all things you should consider. Sorry, I'm mesmerized by this monitor because I seen it priced a little bit lower at a local micro center, but LabTech says long shadows are hard to process, even with like a 3700X. Interesting. I wonder if that's something we're going to see improved with Zen 3, right? Especially with AMD changing the way the CCX modules work now. I mean, I wonder if we're going to see I wonder if that's going to translate into better processing of CPU heavy tasks, like calculating long shadows, for example. I am on a subject of AMD and shadows. I am really curious and interested to see how AMD handles ray tracing and what they call it. I am really looking forward to the Big Navi announcement. And LabTech says better IPC could help. Better IPC could help. Absolutely. So that 19% uplift that AMD is telling us from their keynote, if you haven't seen their keynote, AMD is telling us we could expect a 19% uplift in IPC, and that is amazing. That is amazing. So, but on the subject of IPS monitors, as you can see here, like this MSI 24-inch, and it's on Amazon. Again, any of these monitors, you can find the links down in the basement. The basement is the description box, but IPS panels is essentially was designed to build upon the flaws of TN panels, twisted pneumatic panels. They were meant to enable you to not have to worry about color washing, viewing your monitor at different angles. So depending on the type of monitor you have, you can kind of do this test yourself. Look around your monitor, bend your head, see if you get like this white banding or whitewashing, or the colors appear to get a little saturated as soon as you start to view your monitor in different angles. So IPS monitors, the in-plane switching monitors, was meant to help eliminate that, and essentially they have. Sometimes they can be a little pricey, although this 144 hertz MSI optics monitor is only priced $189. So again, with the if when you look at the build we built last week, if you had $1,400 and you've already accounted for your graphics card, you were at say about 12, and you had that extra $200, that money you can put into again to just upgrading your graphics card. You want to you kind of want to find a balance. You kind of want to find your balance between graphics card and CPU. But if you're on a higher resolution, usually a beefier graphics card is going to give you a better uplift in frames. But as we mentioned, as LabText mentioned in the chat, and I said a few minutes ago, though, your CPU still has to work. So it's very much important you still get a CPU that has, is fast and has good IPC and at least clocks well. LabTech says, honestly, I would take TN over IPS if the TN one has more hertz and better response times. Interesting. So yeah, if is that for 1080p? I mean, especially if that's for 1080p, and you're gaming, you investing in your gaming experience, you can take advantage of that refresh rate and response time. And LabTech says if I was a content creator though, I would take IPS 100%. Yeah, IPS for content creation, it is good, especially if one would want to mount their monitor. So like if you want to mount it to the wall or you want to use an arm for your desk, which here when we move, I plan to upgrade the setup and everything and kind of go with a more modular and mobile setup myself. But if you mount your monitors, it's going to be especially beneficial because then you won't get that washing and color banding around the sides of your monitor once viewing from different angles. But there is one thing you have to consider, and that is the IPS glow. I haven't personally experienced it myself with the few IPS monitors I've used, but in some scenarios, the dreaded IPS glow is just when the backlight, so that's if you're looking here at this MSI, at this monitor here, it's when the backlight, whoa, let me go back. It's when the backlight shines through extremely through the view, through, not through, was when the backlight is too bright and it shines through the normal picture. It could be annoying, but it's not as much as a problem as it was in the past, as a lot of manufacturers are introducing better like nanotechnologies in their monitors. But it's something to consider, especially if you pick one up on the used market and somebody might be wanting to, I can't forget the used market. If someone, if you're looking at monitors, because I bought my 4K monitor off the used market, and let me switch back here. I brought my Asus VG 32 27-inch 4K 28-inch 4K gaming monitor off the used market, and I did not see it on. I was unable to test it. I obviously due to social distancing and things like that. But I just had to kind of trust the seller. And when I got home, I tested the monitor and everything. Everything was well. There were no dead pixels. There were no obvious defects to the monitor. I mean, everything looked really swell. And we did a video on it. You can find it down in the description box or on the our most recent playlist. But we did a video on it, and that's something to consider if you're going to buy a monitor off the used market. But yeah, if you're looking at an IPS panel, you can expect just better viewing angles and sharper contrast ratios. I mean, IPS monitors also sometimes can cost a little more. It might be a little bit higher in the budget, but as this one here, as you can see, we found was only $189. So, and even if we switch here, go to PC Part. If you didn't know, you're searching for a monitor. If you look here at PC Part Picker for the uninitiated, I know we have a few familiar, a few folks in the chat and here in the community that are familiar with PC Part Picker. But if you're not, you can take a look here and you can see that um, you can break down everything you would need in your monitor right here in shop. Maybe you don't want to select the e-tailers or retailers presented by PC Part Picker, so you can jump right back to Amazon once you filtered, once you made all the necessary changes to your filters. But for the sakes of simplicity, we're going to keep it to we're going to switch it back to an IPS. As you can see here, 280 hertz. $399. Ironically, still in that budget, but a 1660 Ti, maybe not fast enough to push this resolution. It's just something to consider. You may want to consider a 20 series super card, maybe even higher, depending on the game you play. But IPS panels typically price a little higher, but you do get good viewing angles. You really do. This MSI Optis G241. This is one of the ones that I had looked at for once I had said maybe I'll stream not at a hyper competitive level, but just for some casual competitiveness, if that even makes sense. But I was looking at this MSI optics monitor here because I mean it had a refresh rate of 144 hertz. It was an IPS panel, and if I wanted to mount them, like I see LabTech says, yeah, IPS are better for arms because you can see brighter colors and weird angles, and that's absolutely true. And that was one of the you know one of the areas IPS monitors were meant to improve upon compared to TN panels, as IPS still can't really match the color accuracy of VA panels. They typically don't have as good as response time, but with an IPS monitor, you can expect at least, I would try to stick around between 4 milliseconds here, as you can see, in between 1 to 4 milliseconds. Anything past that is just very difficult at a competitive level. But yeah, IPS panels, I mean, they're good. Also, like someone mentioned in the chat, like LabTex mentioned in the chat, they're good for content creators too. Because if you're running a dual monitor setup, as most people, maybe if you're a video editor, you want your playback on one side and your timeline on another, and you want to see your changes in real time. If you have a CPU that supports that, I mean, I highly recommend that. You should have a CPU that supports that. But and that's because editing and scrubbing in the timeline, the GPU can accelerate the process. The CPU is definitely a factor when doing that. But you could, I mean, expect for a decent budget monitor, an IPS monitor, if that's something you were interested in, like mounting your monitor from your table using an arm, or from your wall, still using like an extension arm, running even a four monitor setup or a triple monitor setup, which is interesting. I was in a really lengthy chat a while back about um, the best the best possible setup is a tri monitor setup, because dual just seems a little like something's missing on your left. But if you have three monitors, it just seems more complete. Samsung does have you know super ultra wide monitors that could also eliminate that, but not a lot of games support it. And there's plenty of videos that have already been done by much larger content creators. They've been lucky enough to been sent one. I would love to be sent one, and I would love to test it out, but it just seems impractical, as you would need a lot of space, and it's likely for like Hollywood editors. But for those of us on more modest budgets, if you wanted to look at an IPS monitor, because they have, IPS has gotten better with their refresh rate and response times. But if you wanted to, you know, stay around, wanted to get as low as response time as possible, you look at the G241, right? The Asus, if you wanted to level up almost 2x your refresh rate, this $319 Asus Tough Gaming monitor IPS isn't that bad either. Once you figure the MSI optics works, because if you wanted to 3x these, you know, That's like a little. That's close to a $400 or $500 investment. Not bad because if you're able to save up and add to your budget, like in that bill we did, it was like $1,500. So even with three monitors in your base system, you're still doing pretty well. It's in my honest opinion, anything over 1,000 or close to it, you're in the high end range, either between your CPU or your GPU or a mixture of both. You're in that higher end range, which the 5700X at $299 is looking like it's going to be, even at $300, so you can get a B550 motherboard, a Ryzen 5 5600X, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM at 3600 megahertz CL16, between $400 to $450. Once you factor that in with what we're getting with Big Navi, and we're going to get affordable GPUs all up and down the stack. So AMD is touting good 4K, FPS. Well, imagine the 1080p numbers are going to be just as great, and they're going to be priced great. So you're going to have, if you're in that $1,000 range and you already set aside money for your CPU, what we say, 500 Ryzen 5 5600X, $299 6-core Zen 3 CPU, a B550 motherboard, even a respectable one, 119, $149. That's 450, but between your RAM, you're looking at between $400 to $500, depending on your area and prices. I do not mean to be ignorant. I am talking in terms of USD. I know we have some friends that are all over the world, and they have shared the horrors of of the prices of some of these same components that we pay for, and they're just sometimes 30 to 40% higher, which is very unfortunate. Laptech says that they like the G9. Okay, have to look that up. And the Mr. Zombie says, "Give me 120 hertz OLED without a chance of burning." Yeah, and I believe the Mr. Zombified, you shared with us before that you 4K, um, use the 4K 120 hertz. Sparta Rules, ha, I got that right that time. Sparta Rules says, "What's up? It's good to see you. Welcome to the live stream. We're talking monitors and some of the things to look for, some of the different panel types, their pros, their cons, some of your end user usage, um, what to expect in those monitor types if you're looking at a TN panel, which is a twisted pneumatic panel. We looked at some of those earlier. If you're looking at a VA panel, which is essentially about a jack of all trades a monitor is going to get. They're a little bit of a compromise between TN panels and IPS panels in terms of best both price and response time. We switch here to a VA. Let me go back to our lovely filters. But you may not get the best viewing angles, but if you're only looking at a single monitor solution, if you're not looking to mount your monitors and you're not looking, in the future to add one, maybe two, and that way, because if you're looking at this side and you may notice some whitewashing on your, on the left side of your monitor or on the top side of your monitor, that's something to consider. But if you're going with just a single side panel, VA might be the most well-rounded monitor you can go with. It is essentially a jack of all trades. I believe we had a VA monitor here. Let me bring it up. I believe it was this Asus monitor. But we looked at several different VA panel types, and some of the things to consider again is your budget, the type of games you play, and your base system components, your GPU, CPU. Is your GPU beefy enough to push the resolution, drive the refresh rate, either near it or exceeding it? If you can exceed your refresh rate, then you're doing good. In most cases, it's my understanding you wouldn't want to enable any type of, synchronous technology or synchronous technology like VSync or G-Sync or FreeSync. Let me jump over to the chat. Joe, welcome to the live stream, Joe. I believe this is your first time joining us. Joe says, "What's a decent budget monitor for Flight Simulator?" That's a good question. It's a good question. This is assuming, Joe, do for 1080p, 1440p, 4K, as we talked about earlier, 4K is slightly becoming more and more popular. And one of the upcoming videos I'm doing here is about me upgrading my son's computer so he could play Microsoft Flight Simulator because the i5 that's in there now isn't really getting it done. And it barely meets the minimum system requirement specs in order to play Microsoft Flight Simulator. But a decent budget monitor for Flight Simulator, if we're talking 1080p, if we're talking 1080p, and I imagine, see, with Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you really wanted to level up your Flight Simulator experience, I imagine you want a cockpit-like view with your monitor setup. So that's at least three monitors, spread out between your setup. And that way you just get this super immersive experience as if you're just looking out a window on your left and right. In that case, you'd want to go with an IPS monitor. And we have a few budget options here. You have the MSI Optics G24C4, which is $179. Generally, for if you didn't need the refresh rate, you could go with a 60 hertz monitor. They're just gonna cost less. Let me see if let's filter out if um if we were on a budget and we just needed 60 hertz, because it's just, I mean, 60, you always see 60 as like the bare minimum, like, and it's what I recommend. I mean, you could game 30 is playable, 40 is playable, 50 is playable. Most monitors are at least 60 hertz, and this is why you would want to at least be able to be around the monitor's refresh rate of 60 hertz if you're at 1080p, because most 1080p monitors are 60 hertz. If you went into a Walmart right now and you just needed a gaming monitor, or just a monitor in general, chances are you're going to pick up a 1080p TN panel just because they're just easier to produce and they don't cost as much. And they really could serve your needs if you're just looking straight across and you're not concerned with bad viewing angles. Sparta Rule says I have the 1080p MSI optics at 165 hertz, 27-inch. Costco, you got it at Costco's for $200. Wow, and I believe we had that monitor. I believe we had that monitor up too. If not now, at some point during this live stream, we had that monitor up, but we did look at a few different MSI MSI optics monitors. I This is the monitor I'm using is the Mag for sure. The Mag 34 1CQ. This here, the 34-inch ultra wide quad HD monitor, 3440 by 1440. See, this is 2K as well, but it's 100 hertz, and the response time isn't all that great. But again, I don't play competitive games on a competitive level. I play for casual fun. Although I'm super competitive, ironically. But I mean, I play games like Madden and things like that. So, and Fortnite, I do play Fortnite, but it's for fun. It's for casual fun, just to jump in and just kind of shoot the stuff. But most competitive games don't really require like strong graphics or high graphic fidelity to begin with. You'd want to lower the settings to get a highest possible refresh rate. But that's a good monitor, and the Mr. Zombify says you can come across some killer deals at Costco. Absolutely, and that's one of the benefits to being, a Costco club member. And if you're, to our foreign friends, Costco. I mean, Costco may or may not be in your province. I don't mean to be rude, but Costco is a major club retailer here in the United States. I can't remember what was before Costco's. There was something before Costco's, but Costco's came around and put them out of business. Man, I can't remember what it was, but Costco came in and took all the market share. But you know, you you pay for a subscription at Costco's, and you're awarded lower prices in both. Like they sell everything, groceries. We shop there for groceries and things like that because you can get really good prices on things in bulk. But normally they also have some really good deals on open box products as well. Definitely want to keep an eye out on those open box products at Costco's. We talked about this in last week's live stream when we talked about buying used parts from like retailers, and essentially, if you never worked in retail, most of the times when those items come back, it's just simply because either the person bought the wrong item, or they thought the monitor had speakers, or they didn't think that they needed a display port, or what have you, to get the highest refresh rate, because that's important. You want to use a display port to take advantage of the highest possible refresh rate your monitor has to offer. And the biggest difference between HDMI and DisplayPort is HDMI transfers audio through the cord and DisplayPort does not. But open box monitors, you could save a lot of money there, like a lot of money, even on TVs and just other products Costco sells. But Mrs. Zombify says Sam's Club is kind of the same thing. Yeah, and Sam's Club is kind of the same thing. But I think the Sam's Clubs all in my area, I want to say they've closed down, or I can't find them. There used to be one in a neighboring state, Delaware. In the state of Delaware, there was there was one there, but I believe it since it's closed down. But yeah, they're essentially the same thing, and you can sometimes find exclusive deals there simply because you are a you are a member. You pay a subscription to the grocer, and they have groceries, monitors, electronics. When I have children when they were younger, one of the things I enjoy was my wife would go off and get the groceries and things, and I would just spend time looking at the TVs and all the electronics because it was right there as soon as you walked into the store, and I didn't have to go far. By the time she was done and I was done, we were kind of meeting at the checkout line, so it worked out great. I didn't have to walk and grocery shop, which I hate doing, but I just kind of hung around the electronics, and I would just look at all the TVs and just talk to the sales reps, and it was pretty cool because in most, especially here in the States, in most grocery stores, you can't do that. Most grocery stores just only sell groceries. Especially, I like to support some of the, private owned and family owned grocery stores here in my area, and especially the one I mainly go to, they're family owned. And they don't sell electronics, so it's kind of a bummer. It's a little boring when I go in there, but yeah. Mrs. Zombify says yep. So yeah, brother, or fam, you must know my pain. But yeah, essentially, TN panels, TN panels, they favor esports. They're cheap. They don't cost as much. No, this isn't a. This isn't. Let's go back to PC part. Look here. Let's go back to PC part picker. Let me bring up some more TN panels because TN panels are commonly used in the competitive arena. And if you want to save some money, you can go with a TN panel. You can go with a high refresh rate TN panel, with low response time, like this Acer here. I'm not even going to pronounce. I don't know what they were thinking when they went with this here. Well, whatever that name moniker is, we're going to skip over that. But this Acer XF2 250Q, $279, 240 hertz, and a 1 millisecond response time. Right? You pair that with a 2080 Super. 2080s are dropping, ladies and gentlemen. 2080s are dropping. I mean, here we have an upcoming RTX 3070 that's going to be faster than a 2080 and lower. So I've seen a 2080, although it was like an OEM 2080, and it was used by the OEM specifically for that part. So the cooler was like bare, but it was an RTX 2080 on the Facebook Marketplace here in my local area. So I live in what we call the tri-state area. It's like PA, Maryland, and Delaware, and they all essentially are connected. But in that general area, a seller close to me was selling an RTX 3080 for $300. I'm like, wow, that's insane. This graphics card was $800 when it came out. The custom RTX 2080 I used, the MSI Lightning Gaming X Trio, was $849. And so, I mean, that graphics card is selling for $300, and you can almost certainly be able to expect to push this refresh rate at 1080p using this monitor. Spider Rule says, I can't wait for the 3070. Absolutely. I think it's going to be, and Ginseng has already came out. You're going to hear me, if you watch Monday's vlog, you're going to hear me talk about this more in detail. But Ginseng has already came out, and let me switch back here. But Ginseng has already came out and announced that we will not see 3070 stock for the rest of the year and possibly also onward into the future. It's just simply not there. Also for the 3080 and 3090. So I don't know when to possibly get my hands on a 3070. I do want to compare the numbers that we'll all see from other much larger tech tubers that will get sampled those graphics cards, and I want to compare that to then the used price to performance because here's 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 the issue. Here's the thing. Hear me out here. These new graphics cards, they're going to be great. They're fantastic. The 3080 is really fast. It's a 4K compliant card, hands down. The 3090 even more. They are super hard to find, right? They're super hard to find. Because those graphics cards are hard to find, what do if you're ready and you want to upgrade now? It's like, do you wait? Or what about if you want to build your system and you're not, say, you're not upgrading the system you already have built. Let's say you're building a whole entirely new system on top of what you have now. Go with the options that are available. Even if Big Navi, RDNA 2 series, the 6000 series, even if AMD suffers from the same problems, the same supply and demand issues that has plagued Nvidia's Ampere launch, the 30 series, that does not exclude the availability of used graphics cards on the market. For those, buyers who were able or who will be able to get their hands on these graphics cards, can mean one of two things. They're either going to hold on to their, their current hardware and not sell it, or they're going to want to recoup some of the costs of making that upgrade. And so this opens the door to 200 or $250 1080 Ti's, a Pascal Ti variant, still very much a capable card, even at 4K. That 1080 Ti I had, and I had a few of them through the lab, but the 1080 Ti I had, I played at 4K, and it was more. I mean, I really was trying to hit somewhere between 4K 50 FPS to 60 FPS on average, depending on the game, because with 4K the resolution is already high. You really don't need to max out, terrain details or character textures, and you really don't even need any type of anti-aliasing. So I just compensated for the fact that I was at a higher resolution. I didn't really need to turn all the graphics up, and a 1080 Ti is still a capable 4K card, and even for 1440p gaming. And then you have 2080 Ti's now that will be selling here soon, especially after the 3070 launch. Will be selling here soon for about $400 to $500, which is going to be amazing because that's almost less than half of what they've cost at launch. But you can expect the prices for those cards to drop down. It's going to happen. So if you're looking to upgrade, say you're on a 900 series card right now, 700 series card, or a 300 series, XFS Sapphire series card, or a Polaris card like a 400 or a 500 series card, um, and you're holding on to your 570 or your 580, you got 400 in the bank. Weigh your options. If you want to upgrade your game now and you're trying to plan to run games like Microsoft Flight Simulator, for example, Joe had recommended a monitor that you could play Microsoft Flight Simulator. And if you're going with, I'm not sure if I answered your question, Joe, but to just quickly recap and not detract, if you're going with more than one monitor, consider an IPS panel somewhere between 100 and $180 price range, especially if you want to eventually add more monitors, and that way you can take advantage of superior viewing angles. If you only want to focus on a singular panel, then consider going with a TN panel. Okay, or I'm sorry, not a TN panel, a VA panel, right? A vertically aligned panel, and that way you can get a best of both worlds of good color accuracy at different angles, and also still good refresh rates and response time. The Mr. Zombify says, waiting to see AMD's counter. If true, the leak specs seem to be on point. Price per performance would be a win. Absolutely. Um, I think Nvidia is anticipating what Intel knew was coming with Ryzen. I think RDNA 2 is going to shake up the GPU world. I could be wrong, but just seeing how Nvidia is responding with trying to come out with a graphics card that's in between the 3070 and the 3080, because RDNA, here's the most intriguing part of this upcoming GPU war. Here we go again. Um, is that RDNA 2 GPUs, especially I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the Navi 21 XL GPUs are all going to ship with 16 gigabytes of GDDR5 video RAM. 16 gigabytes. That's six more than the 3080, right? And it's not going to cost nowhere. I don't think it's going to cost nowhere near the same amount as the 3080 does. Expected to maybe be a $600 graphics card. I believe it's going to be priced relatively close to the 3070. It really is, but the price to performance is going to be a win for AMD if they can capture some of that magic they've done with Ryzen, right, with on their AM4 socket, and just offer the price to performance that here, especially now with the world experiencing more and more content creators and more streamers and just more and more gamers. We're seeing this with the 3080. The demand is high because um, more and more people are wanting to join in and jump into this hobby. Excuse me, which is fun, expensive. We talked about this. Expensive but fun. Expensive but fun. But yeah, I can't wait to see AMD's response and how Nvidia responds, because the 3070 won't be available for um, most normal Joes like ourselves. Because I would love if AMD is watching. Sure, excuse me, send me a one. I would love to test one. I would love to. And if not, I'm going to do my best to get one to test here in the lab, either a 3070 or a high-end Radeon RDNA 2 GPU. I was rooting for, right, the Radeon 7. And for the uninitiated, if you don't know, AMD did release, a high-end 16 gigabyte graphics card, and it failed to. I mean, it was barely faster than a 2080 at the time, and I believe it cost about $100 more. I mean, the thing ran hot. It was loud. There weren't any, add-in boards made. It was a mess. AMD ended up discontinuing that GPU about 6, 7 months later. And when they announced it, I believe it was Computex or CES, whichever one is in the beginning of the year. When they announced it, I was rooting for it. I was like, yay, I want AMD to offer us a high-end graphics card. Here, historically, AMD always liked to kind of float along along the middle end in terms of graphics cards and kind of offer better price to performance on a lower stack. But this is something we anticipated with Zen 3, and that is AMD upped the prices of Zen 3 CPUs by about $100 to $149. They don't necessarily want to be viewed as the budget alternative anymore. Now we have a $800 consumer friendly CPU in the form of the 5950X. So it's going to be interesting to see AMD graphics or AMD Radeon graphics cards over the $600 mark, because I do believe they are coming, and I do believe Nvidia is trying to drum up a response. Sorry if that was cringe. That might have been a little that might have been a little bit of cringe. But and I do want to remind you, if you're enjoying this live stream, do please remember to give the video a like. I see we are rocking at 11 likes, and we've had an amazing turnout so far. I do appreciate everybody joining in. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, I do welcome you. Hopefully this live stream, I've earned your subscription. Hopefully, I've been entertaining, educational enough to again have earned your subscription. We're growing this community. I've reached 2,100, but then I dropped back down. I guess somebody left and somebody joined, but we're close to 2,100 subscribers, so we're right there. So I'd love for you to join our community, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Check out all the cool stuff in the description. But going back to who is right, which panel is right for you as a user. IPS panels, IPS panels are good for programmers or content creators whose workflow is dependent on more than one monitor. If you're if you're a visual artist, right, or you're a 3D modeler. I have a local buddy of mine who has a 3950X, which I'm curious. I need to call him up, see if he's going to be interested in upgrading to that. Take advantage of that 19% uplift, IPC uplift, and upgrading to a 5950X. But if you're a 3D modeler like he is, right, and maybe you want different windows for different instances of your workflow, you want to go with an IPS monitor, right? You want to go with an IPS monitor, and that way, you won't have to worry about getting ineffective viewing angles. IPS monitors can be a little bit more expensive though, and we've talked about that. I mean, we even went over a few different IPS models. Well, this is TN. Let's go back to IPS, which is in plane switching right here. And Sparta Rule says, I hope AMD can come back swinging so they can bring the competition. Absolutely. Competition is so crucial for us as consumers. Like that is a war we benefit from, right? The competition wars between AMD and Nvidia and AMD and Intel, which we mentioned in last week's live stream. I gotta give, credit to Dr. Lisa Su, where she is fighting this two-pronged war between AMD and Nvidia, and so the competition that is brought about, the competition that is brought about between that conflict benefits us. We get, CPU architectures like Ryzen. It forces Intel to, drive up their innovation and really start bringing us, CPUs that negate their pricing because what AMD is doing on the CPU side, and just improving the CCX modules with the Zen 3, what they're doing on the CPU microarchitecture side is really, really shaking up Intel's market share right now. I mean, AMD is just giving us more price to performance and just more cores for lower prices. And the Mrs. Amplifies or Sparta Rule says, yeah, he says, hope AMD can bring the competition. And the Mrs. Amplifies says, agree. Yeah, I agree too. I think we're all in agreement there that we are rooting. I'm rooting for AMD. I want them to, you know, manufacture a GPU that could exceed the $600 to $700 price range. But unlike the Radeon 7, make it competent though, and make it available to add-in board makers. Just make it, for crying out loud. Please, we are rooting for you. We are rooting for you, AMD. But yeah, but IPS monitors, I mean, they're good if you just want something bare lines. Even this Acer here, 75 hertz would probably be good enough for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Um, and that's under, if you could find it in your area, and that's under $100, or if you could find it on Amazon, right? And then you have this MSI 20 to 1080p 144 hertz IPS monitor. It's $189. So if you wanted to get even more, if you're like, 75, I want more, there is a significant difference between even just 60 to 120 or 140. And let me tell you something. It's not just gaming that you get a benefit from, or that refresh rate. Your mouse moves. That mouse click hits so much differently on a higher refresh rate monitor. It just really does, and the difference is really. I mean, you can feel the difference. I certainly did when I went from even 4K 60 to 3440 by 100, and I've been able to test 144 hertz in Micro Center, and you just feel the difference. The game just feels really, really smooth, and when you can really capture that balance of refresh rate and graphics, it's what makes PC gaming one of the best experiences available. No shade to consoles at all, but consoles are normally locked to 60, and that was really just with some of the later ones that came. Previously, most of the games were locked to 30, and that is what made me want to switch to PC gaming. I don't know if you heard the story, but I'll keep it quick. I was playing Mad Max and was experiencing frame rate drops down to like single digits, and I was just like, no, no, no. This game, this game requires fast and fluid movements. Even though I was playing on a controller, I still had, it still relied on, you know, fast response time, and I was getting really low frame rate dips, and it just was frustrating me, and it ruined my experience playing that game. Although I did finish it, but it still ruined my experience playing that game, and that is when I wanted to just go full in to to upgrading my PC at the time, which could not run Mad Max, ironically. But you know, I I appreciate now refresh rate and true graphics because even most consoles, their games are most likely at either low or high settings. They're almost you can't change your graphic settings in console games. So and they're on highly optimized hardware. But we're not talking about consoles here. Again, they have their purpose. The PCs have character. Okay, PCs have character. And when you're looking at a gaming monitor, just a few other things to take into consideration is tilt. If you're sitting in long sessions and you want to adjust your height and the height and the uh, tilt of your monitor, it is welcoming to have. I will honestly say, not all monitors support it, but the Asus 28-inch 4K monitor I have downstairs has similar articulation here to this Asus monitor, almost near identical. So you can go full vertical if you so please, right? Plus 90-degree swivel and 133 millimeter height adjustment. So, I mean, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of the position of your monitor. And some people want to go full vertical because it elongates their chat, or some people like to read websites that way. It's very weird. I personally only looked at it one way. It was like, nah, I'll go back to landscape mode. I can't really do portrait mode, but there are people, and especially programmers though, that benefit from it. So it's important why again you see this is in mostly IPS monitors, which I'm not sure this Asus monitor might not be an IPS monitor, but either way, depending on the manufacturer will depend on if you get this ergonomic design like you see here in this monitor. And of course, speakers aren't a must. Most people don't prefer speakers on a monitor. Most people prefer a more robust audio solution. But if you're limited on space, it is nice to have these options, right? For your headphones and what have you. If you don't have a sound card on your computer, or you can't run um you can't run a gaming headset like I'm using here. But it is important to note just to make sure you're comfortable. I mean, being comfortable because most people don't realize, you're sitting at your desk. Gaming at your desk is not the same as gaming on your couch. Is what most PC gamers, or not, I'm sorry, most console gamers game on their couch. It's not the same with gaming on a PC. So sometimes you can get uncomfortable, and I believe it was RTX on last live stream who mentioned that even having a good gaming chair is arguably just as important as any other part in your arsenal, and that is to also make sure you maximize on comfortability. That's just as important, right? And one other bonus I wanted to add that I discovered too is that most monitors. Sorry, real quick, we jump over to the chat. Let Mrs. Zombify says portrait mode for a second monitor is pretty cool though. Yeah, and especially if you're a streamer, which is what I see in most setups in like Facebook groups, um, and on Twitter, and people tag me on Twitter. Which, if you're not following me on Twitter, shameless plug, but give me a follow at Inside the Lab YT. I love having that buffer of direct communication between members of the audience. But portrait mode with those monitors, or portrait mode, is really good for streamers who want to maintain their chat in a vertical alignment. And so they definitely have their purpose. I just haven't quite discovered it. And when I stream, again, I stream casually, and I throw the chat box on the screen like here, so I can follow it. But But yeah, that I mean that setup is suitable for me. It may not be for you, but uh, they definitely have their purpose. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing though, Mrs. Amplified. Also, you want to make sure you monitor. Here's the thing with mounting. Most monitors are VESA compliant, and they'll tell you that, but you just want to make sure you have the appropriate mountain brackets if you were looking to, mount your monitor to a wall or um, mount it to a swing arm from your table. Having a monitor that is universally compliant with most mountain brackets is important. I mean, be aware of the monitor's weight and the maximum, weight restriction and the monitor's size limitations. For example, not all arms are, fit the same monitor size, and not all of them support the same weight either. So when you're looking at, if that's something you're interested in, just keep in mind the monitor's weight and resolution. Or not resolution. See, I can't. It's because I didn't have enough coffee today. Where's my? I didn't have enough coffee today. I can't use my words, but not the monitor's resolution, but the monitor's dimension. In this case, this is a 24-inch monitor, and I don't really like how Amazon gives me enough specs. Personally, what I recommend is you search for your monitor on PC Part Picker. That's because you just have a more set of options to choose from to really find a monitor. As you can see here, vase and mounting the exact portions that you would need to compensate whatever arm you would go with. But yeah, highly recommend PC Part Picker going with your uh, shopping for your monitor. Sorry, but yeah, switch back here. One one other thing I like to mention is that some manufacturers also have a dead pixel policy, so that's something you should look into if you before you make your buy. They all differ, and they actually are laws depending on your state here. If you're in the states, depending on the state you live in, there are laws designed around that. So some manufacturers require you to have a certain amount of dead pixels before they replace the monitor, and some say may just require you to have one. It all depends on the laws in your local state. um, just something to consider. I found that really interesting. It had me look up the dead pixel policy for my monitor, and although I have no dead pixels to worry about, it was just one, depending on how long you bought it. So that's just interesting. This is something to consider, especially if you're buying a new monitor, right? Or even if you pick one up on the used market and it's still within warranty. But all right, so again, we talked about the different types of panel types. You have TN panels, some of the most commonly used. Hit the scene a while back, replace CRT models. Have some of the lowest response times, but not the best contrast ratios, and also has poor viewing angles. Then we talked about VA panels, which are vertically aligned panels, which are the jack of all trades, which is a hybrid, a balance, a compromise, if you will, between IPS and TN panels. But you have VA, so you also have IPS, which is in plane switching, IPS panels, which are great for, monitors you plan on mounting, or if you're looking at your monitor from a different viewing angle. Those are going to be your best option if you're a programmer. And most programmers really want, you know, for 6 monitors. I've seen like 8, 12 monitor setups across the webs. And it's very interesting. Yeah. Um, Sparta Rules shares that he says, that's why I love Costco. I have a 2-year warranty. Nice. Nice. That's great, man. I, I wonder if that's also one of the benefits to being a member with Costco's. But that 2-year warranty, that is clutch. And Mr. Zombify says, I was about to say that part. Yeah, I believe we have a Costco's. Oh, we have BJ's. Okay. So BJ's is very much like Costco's. But we are BJ members as well. So BJ's too has electronics, and And for those who don't know, it's the same structure. You pay a yearly subscription to be able to shop there. They often run promos too because they really don't want to stop you from shopping there. They want to make the money either way. So they'll maybe give you like 6 months free and you can shop there that way. All kinds of ways to take advantage of that subscription. But yeah, as Sparta Rules shared, you have you have better warranty options you can choose from if you're buying your products from um, BJ's or from Costco's. So yeah, but thanks for sharing that with us. But in a nutshell, when looking for your monitor, consider your needs. Consider your needs. That is the type of games you play, type of games you plan on playing in the future. For example, Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out, and if that game, I imagine is going to look really, really, really good in 4K. I plan on personally checking it out in 1440p, both ultra wide and 2560 by 1440p. But consider your needs, consider the types of games you play, consider if you have a competitive outlook, excuse me, or perspective, a competitive career you want to consider. Consider all those things either before upgrading your computer or upgrading your monitor or buying your monitor in tandem with either your pre-built PC, which buying a pre-built is okay. And by me saying that is you have options of pre-built. You can use, builders who offer the service as a business, and you can have them consult with you, pick the parts out. I do it here locally. Um, and there's all types of big brands that offer that service too. You have NZXT's BLD service, although they're very exclusive to the parts you use. They obviously want you to use a lot of their components, but you have your options to get a pre-built PC. And when you're shopping either for your parts or for your pre-built PC, uh, you know, consider the performance metas for that monitor. Can your system power the monitor you want and need to buy? Are you a video editor, for example? Do you need as close to, do you need true color accurate composition? Do you need good contrast ratios? Do you need your colors to be strong and vibrant? um, but you also want a monitor that's going to enable you to still game and enjoy the best of both worlds. So a good response time and high refresh rates, good color contrast ratio. VA panels are essentially the compromise there. Those are the monitors that are going to give you the best of both worlds. IPS, it will be the next close runner up for a general all around monitor, especially if you don't plan on, or especially if you plan on using more than one. But it really depends on how much you're willing to spend, what your needs are. Do you need high refresh rates? Or do you want the most pixels to take advantage of your SP games, your single player games? The Mrs. Zombify asks, what's your experience playing on an ultra wide? I I personally love it, and again, let me jump, and you can find the link to this monitor is down in the description box. But I play on this exact monitor here, and I play games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Origins. I'm looking forward to playing Valhalla. I played games like The Witcher 3, Fallout 76. Eventually did get an update that supports ultra wide, which made me fantastic because playing playing Fallout 76 ultra wide is really fun. Although the frame rate is locked to 50 hertz. So that's kind of a hard trade-off because my graphics card doesn't it's not really working as much at that point. But my experiences with ultra wide is it's a great resolution, 21 by 9, and it's a great resolution and aspect ratio to game at if you really enjoy the extra scenery. Like I explained earlier in the live stream, I uh, when I'm testing games on the 28-inch monitor, the 28-inch 4K monitor, I'm not as good competitively that I am when I'm playing on my ultra wide, and that's because the extra real estate on the left and right side of the monitor does help if I'm looking straight and I can just notice movement, subtle movement, and the human eye reacts to movement, and the extra real estate just helps with me detecting that movement, and that just allows me to be more reactionary to people um, that are a little bit distant down the map. It really makes RPG games, or single player adventure games, really really immersive. um, and even when I'm working on content, having the I guess you would say the equal of two 710-inch monitors on one base, on one chassis, does help save space, cords, all what have you. And I can just drop two windows if I'm editing and I want to watch, say, football. If I'm not using this monitor here, I'll just split the monitor. Or if I'm reading two articles, I have a habit of doing that. I like to read like two articles if they're related at the same time. It just makes it seem like it's one long book by two different authors. But having the extra space with an ultra wide monitor is really beneficial, both from a content creator perspective and from a gamer's perspective. Um, it gets weird when I stream because I output at 1920 by 1080p, so I just have to adjust for that. But I personally love it. I want to upgrade to say like 144 hertz though. Like I think I am starting to outgrow 100. But this this monitor This monitor is a TN panel or VA panel. I'm sorry. This is a VA panel, and it does have great viewing angles. Like if I go this way, there's no, there's no color change. There's no whitewashing, and everything looks the same. All the colors still look sharp. I don't lose any, um, I don't lose any quality in the screen. I really don't. And that's the same for gaming. But on the panel here, which is a TN panel, I do sometimes get slight like whitewashing if I'm trying to view it at different angles, and I get these weird glares. And this does have anti-glare backlit technology, and it does pay off. It's just really sharp. And again, I paid under 400 for mine from eBay. So you can find this monitor on eBay. You might not be able to find it on Amazon, as it did come out quite a while back, but it performs great for my gaming and my creative needs. If It did take some while to get used to, though, I will say. Switcher from standard 16 by 9 aspect ratio to 21 by 9 did take some getting used to, but you grow into it really fast. And now using a 1080p monitor sometimes is really hard for me. My son, does all his gaming and everything on 1080p monitor. So when I'm servicing their computer or just helping them troubleshoot different issues, like my head starts hurting a little bit. I'm like, man, I haven't really seen 1080p resolution in a while. Although there's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong at 1080p at all. Sparta Rule says Odyssey, in my opinion, is trash. They changed a lot in that game and took away awesome features that were in the old games. Okay, that's fair enough. I do know they changed a great deal. I am so late to the. Let me switch back here. But I am so late to the Assassin's Creed Origin and Odyssey, remake. I'm just now playing Assassin's Creed Origins, and I'm trying to get used to the change. But even as I'm playing it, I'm like, well, it just feels like The Witcher. I understand where the sentiment with most reviewers who were saying at the time it just felt like The Witcher in a different setting. And I kind of resonate with that as I'm still in the middle of playing The Witcher 3. It's such a long game. I didn't really want to just kind of shoot to the end, as every time you go off to explore, you're always finding something new. And I just don't have as much time that I've had in the past, disposable time, to play games now that I create content. I gotta take it slower. I try to just go through the game as quickly as possible. But Origins has changed a lot since the last Assassin's Creed I remember playing, and that was Unity, right? Like the last Assassin's Creed game I played was Unity. I stand corrected. That was Syndicate. I tried Syndicate and I just couldn't get into Syndicate. I tried and I just couldn't do it. But Unity was the last Assassin's Creed game that I played from beginning to finish, and that was on a PS4. But Odyssey, I haven't gotten around. I've just really ran the benchmark and play around with the settings in it. But I haven't had the opportunity to play it, objectively. So, or subjectively, I suppose. But what do you think of Valhalla, Sparta Rules? Do you think they're going to fix some of those shortcomings that, gamers and reviewers pointed out in Odyssey? Do you think they're going to fix it in Valhalla? I know we haven't really seen or haven't got enough context from it, but just from what we know with Valhalla, you tell me. I had to play Odyssey, which I like to normally try to stick to the continuity of stories. I do fancy myself a storyteller. I enjoy a good story. Here recently, I just started watching some of the um, rewatched some of the Alien movies. So we watched Alien, both Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I don't know why I said use those excuses or use those examples of stories because I watched them again to try to understand, this prequel story that really Scott has put on us. But yeah, I am likely going to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The setting looks different, but here coming up in November, the game that's probably going to take most of my time will likely be Cyberpunk 2077, unless I can't find something about it that that I just can't really jive with, or it's not for me, or what have you. But yeah, I mean, and Sparta Rule says I hope they do, and hopefully they will. And, I'm not sure with the state of the world, the kinds of resources developers have, and the different time constraints that might be factors with games and upcoming games. But hopefully they've had the opportunity to iron out those issues in Valhalla, with Valhalla that people pointed out in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origin. I've played Origin so far. I mean, it's okay. I like the setting that it's in. The setting takes place on the continent of Africa, so it's very different for the um, for the Assassin's Creed franchise, and they did a really decent job, in my opinion, by recreating that timeline. It really feels like you're, browsing through Egypt. Yeah, like Mr. Zombify says, 2077 will be the game for a while. Absolutely. And they're saying that game's going to run just as much, if not longer, than, The Witcher 3 did. I'm like, wow, I don't know if there's going to be enough time in the day. I'm just gonna have to just slowly kind of take my time and enjoy Cyberpunk 2077. But I do plan on doing some content around that game. Tested the different hardware level, different hardware requirements from basic to recommended, and different resolutions from 1080p to 1440p and even 4K. Especially if I get my hands on an Ampere card, right? 3070 or 3060 would be nice, but that remains to be seen. But all right, now I think it's time for this ride to slowly come to an end. I think it's time to start. I think the ride is slowly coming to an end. I want to thank everybody who came out to this live stream. I promised it wouldn't be as long as last Saturday's live stream, which ran for about the length of 2.5 Marvel movies. I did not realize that until after the live stream, once I got off and I, just optimize the live stream for the replay. With shout out to our replay friends who check out our replay of some of the live streams. I do try to keep the topics helpful and limit the you know community heavy live streams. Although we will do some pop up live streams, so be on the lookout for that. But I do appreciate everybody coming out and hanging with us. I'm glad we kept it under 2 hours, so we kept it under just about a Marvel movie. But I do appreciate everybody coming by. I just want to say hello and one more shout out to Sparta Rules for coming by. The Mr. Zombified, right? We had Lab Text, we had Joe Hornsey. I think I pronounced that right. I believe I know which Joe that is too. But we had Lab Techs, we had Damian Warren stop by. Oh, I didn't even see Dr. Elo. I had missed Dr. Elo. Wonder, Dr. Elo, if you're still watching. Let me know in the chat if you're still here with us, Dr. Elo. I missed you in the chat, brother. Dr. Elo's a fellow POV. Uh, POV Society member. It's a creators group that I'm in, and he's one of the creators that we're trying to work on getting me an interview on his channel. So for a less formal interview, or if to find out a little bit more about me, but you can always ask a question during our live streams within reason. I will do my best to answer them. Drinky Crow gives us one last comment. He says 17-inch by 29-inch screen, 1080p, like 6 years old. I'll be looking for a 1440p for Christmas. Okay, dope. And Drinky Crow, do you have a budget in mind for your monitor? Maybe before we leave, maybe before we peace out, we can maybe look at one 1440p. You tell us what you're looking for in a monitor. You know, IPS, VA, or TN. Joe says, "Good stream, bro. Thank you." And Joe, tell me if that's the Joe I used to work with. I believe that's the Joe I used to work with. I want to say that's the Joe I used to work with, but I could be wrong. I think I did this on a live stream before. Either way, hey, look, I appreciate you being here and thank you. I am working on improving the quality of the live streams here, making the topics as helpful and informative as possible. Resolution is and refresh rates, input lag, those things can all get, really confusing in the grand scheme of things, but just something to factor in and just consider is 1080p is the most balanced resolution, modern resolution you can game at, and 60 hertz is a entry level, refresh rate that you would want to jump into, even if it's just for the first time. In my honest opinion, though, you're going to outgrow 1080p 60 hertz very fast. And at that point, depending on the direction you go with your gaming, you may either want to get a higher game at a higher resolution to appreciate the detail in games, especially in open world games. That's how I like to game. Like I like to appreciate the detail. Um, or you may want to break into the esports world, and you may want more, a higher refresh rate because going from 60 to 144 hertz, the difference is day and night. My understanding is, past 360, which I haven't had the opportunity to experiment with, but past 360 is like mind blowing, mind blowingly fast. And I can only imagine the competitive edge that could give you. But, depending on your future outlook, depending on the direction you go, just consider that your system, if it's already built like you have it, your system is going to be able to drive the resolution and refresh rate that that you want to upgrade to. If not, you may want to consider upgrading your GPU, especially if you're going with a higher resolution. You may want to consider upgrading your GPU. But Drinky Crow, yeah, let me know. And then if not, let me know if you have any questions over on the Twitter. If you have a Twitter, you give me a follow there. But I do appreciate everyone coming on. Okay, I do appreciate everyone spending their Saturday with me. We do this every Saturday. If you're still watching, we do this every Saturday at about 12:35. And again, you can find some helpful links down in the chat that supports the channel in a direct way from our mailing list and our merch and the official Inside the Lab Creators Hub website, where you can take an expanded look at the content here on the channel and beyond video format. It's also a great way to learn more about myself or even communicate with me directly for a more formal approach. Say if you want to shoot me an email or you're interested in some of the services I offer here locally and online. So again, thank you for all for coming out. Do appreciate you being here. I hope to catch you guys and girls all in the next live stream. So until then, be easy.